Sterling. Sterling was an upright little salt shaker who stood at the center of the dinner table, right next to the old pepper mill. Yet despite the fact that they were stationed together and often called into the service together, they did not enjoy a great camaraderie. The old pepper mill was too coarse a fellow. And Sterling, though not a snob, was more refined. His bright, slender crystal sides gleamed there. His silver dome cap with its little freckles shone so brightly. Sterling's mother had retired to the sideboard many years before. She was an old salt cellar, proud of the fact that she'd been born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and that she could trace their lineage as far back as Queen Anne's table. Now, Sterling was surrounded by crystal and cutlery, china, pewter dishes. And during the dinner hour, he freely made his rounds, giving service to any of the dinner guests that required his salt. And the dinner hour was always alive with the clink and clatter and the music of all the dinnerware at service. But after all the dinner guests had left the table and left the room, late at night, the moonlight would look in through the window on her charges, for she was mistress of all things silver and crystal. And at such times the dinnerware would discuss the day's events. "Did you see the way that little boy kept tapping me with his spoon?" the china dish might complain. "Really, I thought I would chip." The wine glass would add, "Yes, and that old gentleman kept twirling me round and round and round until I became so dizzy I spilled my Bordeaux." Sometimes at night, the little book mouse would come to join the conversation. The book mouse had come into the house from the field many years before and taken up residence in the library. It was such a quiet, peaceful room, and nobody ever used it. And besides, she would say, books make the very best bedding. And so she would always bring to the conversation some little bit of literature that she'd just been nibbling on. Things like, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever. The poetry of the earth will never die." Or, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on." To which the pepper mill would usually reply, "I say, grip tightly to what you have, for once it is gone, there is nothing." And so in this way, the late-night conversation would go. But Sterling would stand silently. He wasn't sure what he thought or what he believed. All he knew was that he had salt, and that it was his job to deliver it. And so he would go dutifully about his rounds all around the dinner table, serving every hand that reached for him. And he never thought to look up, to look beyond his little life at the center of the table. Until one evening, as Sterling was held aloft in the hands of an uncertain dinner guest who was trying to determine whether her soup needed more salt, Sterling looked out. And over the shoulders of the dinner guest, and on towards the window where the moon was just starting to rise, he saw the tea service. And there, between the teapot and the creamer, he saw gleaming a vision of loveliness. Her round, voluptuous hips curved gently in at the waist and then opened out to reveal her chaste white treasure to all the world. There she glowed radiant in the moonlight. And it was in that moment that Sterling fell hopelessly in love with the sugar bowl. And in the next moment, he was set back at the center of the table, where the pepper mill greeted him. "I keep telling you, you're much too liberal with your salt. Grip it, grip, grip what you've got." But Sterling paid no attention at all, for he was possessed by this vision of loveliness, and his one thought was to attain his beloved. And that night, As everyone had left the room and the dinnerware began to discuss its daily affairs, Sterling hailed the gravy boat as it passed, hopped aboard, and headed towards Table's End. Slowly began to glide across the broad blue expanse of the tablecloth, past candelabra and crystal. And as he came by the sideboard, he called off to his mother, "Mama, I am off to seek my true love." "Why a salt shaker should see fit to seek his true love is more than I could fathom," she replied. "But take these few grains of advice with you. Every silver lining has its cloud, and not all that glitters is true salt." Sterling paid no heed. He only thought of reaching Table's End and attaining his beloved. And at last he came to Table's End, and he looked out across the dark divide, and there in the moonlight he saw her between the teapot and the creamer. His beloved, the sugar bowl, more radiant and more lovely than the first time he had seen her. And he wanted to call to her, he wanted to sing to her, he wanted to woo her in some way. "Lady," he said, "I love you." "Oh," she replied, "look, I've an admirer. What a handsome fellow. Look, sing to me, recite to me. Oh, a troubadour, isn't it delightful?" Sterling desperately tried to recall some song, a poem that he might know, that he could recite to the sugar bowl, and he began to think of all the things he'd heard around the dinner table and to make a repertoire out of what he had heard there. Things like, "God is great, God is good, and we thank him for this food. For these and all thy blessings we give thanks. Good food, good meat, good God, let's eat." And in this way, awkwardly, haltingly, Sterling wooed his beloved, and she encouraged him. "Oh, sing to me some more. Isn't it wonderful? Look, I've an admirer. Ha ha, no one else is admired like I am. Isn't he wonderful? Isn't he handsome? Oh, my wonderful troubadour. Come to me," she said. "Come to me. Come into my arms. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm waiting for you." That was all that Sterling needed to hear. Without giving heed of the danger, he leapt from Table's End towards his beloved, and for a moment he rose up into the darkness, and there he lingered with the angels and the stars. And in the next moment, Sterling fell. He hit the dining room floor, his cap was dented and popped off of him, and his salt scattered in every direction. "I never thought he would do it," said the sugar bowl. "I hope he's all right." "Ah, serves him right," said the teapot. "Young whippersnapper," said the creamer. "That'll show you, it'll serve you right. Don't you know, the sugar bowl is mine, she's all mine. We commingle under cover of coffee and tea, we do." And so they laughed at Sterling from their high place on the tea table. And Sterling lay there in the dark, his salt scattered. And the moon passed by, and the room grew darker still. And late at that night, the little book mouse began to make her rounds. And she came across the salt on the floor. "Oh, my goodness, what a wonderful treasure is here. How lucky—" "Oh, dear," she said, when she saw Sterling. "Dear, dear, dear, dear. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Such a sight as this becomes the field, but here shows much amiss. What is it that brought you to this base condition, little one? Was it treachery? Was it false pride? Was it love?" Sterling let loose a shuddering sigh. "Ah," said the book mouse, "I might have known. Love it was. Only love could make such a mess." Now, tell the little book mouse all about it." And she gathered up all the salt into a nice little mound there, and she stroked Sterling gently. "You'll be all right. You're just fine. Your cap is dented a bit, but other than that, you'll be just fine. Now tell me all about what happened and how you got here." And so Sterling slowly began to recount the tale of how he fell for the sugar bowl. And the book mouse said, "Oh, now, you have a great heart. You have the gift of the ability to give love. And that is a great gift. Do not fret over the sugar bowl. She's nothing. An empty calorie. She, my boy, is merely an afterthought, a mere confection. But you stand at the center of the table. You possess true salt. You are the thing that kings go to war for. But the sugar bowl, pah, nothing. Oh, but I love her, said Sterling. Love her, said the book mouse. I don't believe it. No, I'm willing to bet you love the moonlight and not the sugar bowl. Look at her now. Can you honestly tell me that you love her? And Sterling looked up and he saw there was the sugar bowl between the creamer and the teapot. In the darkness, no longer glowing, radiant, dull, unimportant. And from that vantage point, Sterling had to admit it did not feel the same. Still, he was not willing to let go of his great sadness. The book mouse looked around her and she saw all that salt. She said, you know, it is a pity to let all this salt go to waste. I wonder if you wouldn't mind, could I have some of this salt? Oh, take it, said Sterling, take it. I have no need for it. I don't care about anything anymore. Now. Don't talk like that. No, but I will appreciate the gift. Thank you. And I will pay you back. I will not take something for nothing. I will find the right thing to repay you with someday. But, oh, dear, what can I give thee, O liberal and princely giver, who hast taken the gold and purple of thine heart, unstained and untold, and placed it outside the wall for such as I to take or leave withal? That's Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but it seemed right. Well, I'll think of something, she said, and she gathered up the salt and she scurried off into the darkness. The next morning, the kitchen maid found Sterling there on the floor, dusted him off, refilled him with salt, placed his cap back upon him, and returned him to the center of the table, where the peppermill said, what did I tell you? Grip tightly to what you've got, for once it is gone, there is nothing. And Sterling was inclined to agree, for his tears choked him, and he became much more reluctant to share his salt. Indeed, the guest at the dinner table after that had to tap him roughly to get him to let loose of even 1 or 2 grains. And the dinnerware conversation late at night all began to be centered around Sterling's new melancholy and the peppermill's philosophy. I believe that anything worth having is worth working for, he said. Waste not, want not. But one night, the little book mouse came back to visit Sterling, and she said, I have it. I have the gift that I was looking for, that I wish to repay you with, for the gift of your salt. Oh, what can you give me, said Sterling. I don't want anything. Don't try to offer me hope. I'll have nothing of it. Hope, said the book mouse. Oh, no, hope is a bubble. No, I wouldn't try to give you hope. The only thing I want, said Sterling, is love. Love, she said. Well, if by that you mean you want someone to love you, I'm sorry I can't help you really in the way that you wish, but no, I can give not what men call love. But wilt thou accept not the worship the heart sends above and the heavens reject not? The desire of the moth for the star, of the night for the morrow, the devotion to something afar from the sphere of our sorrow? That's a little bit of Shelley, but it seemed appropriate. If you will, devote yourself to this. And she held up a grain of rice. What is that, said Sterling. This is rice, my boy, and I will give it to you if you give me something in return. What can I give you? Well, I don't want any more of your salt than that. No, I want you to tell me of something that you find good in your life. A grain of rice for something nice. Oh, I can't think of anything good. Oh, now, stop that now. I'm sure you can find at least one good thing that you can recall. Oh, said Sterling. Well, the kitchen maid is nice. She dusts me off from time to time and gives me more salt. Very good, said the book mouse. You've earned your grain of rice. And she gave the grain of rice to Sterling, slipped it up under his dome, and dropped it down into his heart. And immediately, his tears began to dry. And his outlook brightened a bit. Now tell me more, said the book mouse. Come on, I'm sure there's more than one good thing in your life. Well, said Sterling. Well, my mother's always telling me how important I am. "Yes," said the Book Mouse, "I suppose that's worth a grain of rice. All right, very well. Is there anything else, anything at all?" Then Sterling really began to think, and he thought, that moment when I leapt off table's end, and for a moment I was with the stars and the angel, that was a truly great moment. "Oh, yes," said the Book Mouse, "that's worth 3 grains of rice." And so in this way they sat there at the center of the table, discussing what was good in life, until Sterling's heart was filled with rice. And after that little visit with the Book Mouse, his outlook was much brighter. His salt was much more free-flowing. And his service became once again more liberal at the dinner table, as he began to give freely what salt he had to any takers. And Sterling began to look up now from the center of the table, and he realized he was indeed at the center. He was surrounded by beauty. The china, the pewter, the candles, the crystal, and the faces of all the people that came to that table. All those people that he could serve. And he realized the goodness of service. And he saw that he loved every face and every surface that he saw. And he saw that it was the moonlight in some way gleaming across everything, and he began to understand what the Book Mouse said. He said, yes, it is true in a funny way. It is the moonlight. It is the moonlight that shines in everything. The peppermill, meanwhile, holding tightly to his own philosophy, soon lost his usefulness at the dinner table, and his service ground to a halt. And so he was taken away from the center of the table, and shortly after that was replaced by a slender young pepper shaker. Much more to Sterling's liking. And Sterling, now being the elder at the center of the table, saw fit to share with her his new-formed philosophy. He said to her, "I have come to believe that we must give freely the gift we have, for we all have that within which we can never lose, and that is the knowledge of the goodness of life. That is our rice." And if you see Sterling today, you'll see his jauntily dented cap. That's a story he can tell you. But look at him. You will still see that he keeps close to his heart those grains of rice, for they are his desiccant against despair.